All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 20th, 2020 Westminster City Council study session. I'd like to start off the meeting tonight with a roll call. Ms. Parker, if you would, please.
Certainly. Mayor Atchison.
Yes.
Councillor Demott.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Seitz.
Here.
Councillor Seymour.
Here.
Councillor Scully.
Here.
Councillor Smith.
Here.
And Councillor Bowles.
Here.
All right, thank you, Ms. Parker. The first item up on the agenda will be the council reports. If there's any member of the council has an item they want to report on, please put your name on the chat line so I'll know who to call on. Ms. Seitz, go ahead.
Just want to give a quick update on some meetings that I attended last week. Both the mayor and I attended Dr. Cog on Wednesday evening. I'll let him go over the details of that. It was a pretty much just an overview on the MetroVision process, but he can go into more details on everything that was on the agenda. And then also we had the North Area Transit Alliance Strategic Planning Commission meeting. As you all saw from an email I sent you, the governor, Senator Westminster, and Matt Gray did announce the folks that they have decided to nominate. Sorry, some real life going on right there. People coming in the room for the RTD Accountability Committee. And so I did send you the list. I'm really excited. I think we have a lot of good representation up north, and it's a good list of really dedicated, experienced folks. Finally, I did notice that in our agenda packet tonight, we did finally, after many years of anticipation, we have the sustainability plan draft. And I do think that as this is a large component of our vision statement, something that's been in the strategic plan for many years, I would ask that we have a study session so that we can go over it a little bit more in more detail and with the public able to hear as well prior to us approving it. So those are my comments.
Mr. Bowles, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two items. Well, I also want to, I guess, piggyback on what Mayor Pro Tem Seitz just said. In our packet tonight, in the information only section, is the sustainability draft plan. As a liaison to the Environmental Advisory Board, I just wanted to bring people's attention to that. I would also second that we could have a study session on that, and I would support that. I think it would be a great idea. In the meantime, draft comments. So any comments or questions about the draft need to be submitted to Paul Schmeeken, our Chief Sustainability Officer, by August 3rd. So please take another look at that. And if you have any questions, August 3rd is the deadline for at least this round. So I wanted to bring everyone's attention to that as a liaison to Environmental Advisory Board. And I should say that it's not just environmental issues. There's water resources are in there, financial sustainability and economic sustainability. So there's a lot of housing issues. There's a lot of good information in there. So take another look at that. And then also the Human Services Board has been meeting a few times since the last time we met. So I wanted to bring your attention to that. They received, the Human Services Board received 26 applications for grants for this year for their process. 2 of those are new for this year. And they should be bringing their recommendation as they're looking at those, reading them and meeting. They should have that recommendation for the City Council on August 3rd. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. So thank you very much.
All right, is any other member of council has a report they want to provide at this time? Mr. Andrews, if you'd like to bring the city manager's report in, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. This is Acting City Manager Jody Andrews, and I have some brief comments for you this evening. First, staff does have updates for you on our COVID response efforts, and those will be provided later for you in tonight's agenda. Second, I want to note, as noted by Mayor Pro Tem Seitz and Councillor Volz, in the packet tonight is that information-only memorandum that presents the draft of the city's first ever sustainability plan. And that is a key element of the city's vision statement and an objective of the city's strategic plan. So this is a work in progress, and we would very much appreciate the opportunity to bring that back to you for review and discussion at a subsequent study session. So we'll work on getting that scheduled. In the meantime, you're welcome to review the draft and send us your comments to our Chief Sustainability Officer, Paul Schmeeken, again by August 3rd, and that will help us prepare for the study session. I would also note that staff will be providing an update on face covering communications as requested in an earlier City Council meeting, and that information, which was just finalized late this afternoon, including statistics, will be included in your Tuesday morning email tomorrow. So we tried to get that to you earlier, but we did bring in some additional data that I think you'll appreciate and responding to the discussion. So please watch for that in tomorrow morning's Tuesday communication to you. Now, and finally, in City Manager's comments for tonight, I would like to bring to your attention 3 meetings that are coming up this week and over the coming weekend. The first meeting is on July 23rd, so this Thursday at 6 p.m. And it's a virtual neighborhood meeting for a proposed Quick Trip gas station at the northwest corner of 104th Avenue and Sheridan Boulevard, and that's adjacent to the City Park Recreation Center. The Quick Trip Corporation has proposed a development that would have a gas station, convenience store, and an empty pad site for a future retail commercial use on this vacant 5.66 acre privately owned lot. The developer has completed the first stage of the development process, which is the filing of a preliminary development plan, or PDP, to seek approval of the use from City Council. The public is invited to attend the virtual meeting this Thursday, which will also be streamed live on the city's YouTube channel. The PDP application requires review and consideration by the Planning Commission and City Council before any development would occur or can occur. The public hearings for the PDP have not been scheduled at this time. The applicant will also need to apply for an official development plan, construction drawings, and building permits if the project proceeds. For details on the project, you can visit the city's website, where you'll find a Quick Trip project page in the planning section, or you can contact our city planner, Jacob Kaza, directly. The second meeting, also on the same night, Thursday, July 23rd, begins at 5:30 p.m. and is scheduled to 7 p.m. That meeting has been set up by the applicant of the Uplands proposed development project. That will be in the format of a virtual webinar. The meeting has been organized and will be hosted entirely by the applicant. And I would please note that the City of Westminster was not involved in the organizing or hosting of this meeting, but I wanted to make sure we made our public aware that it's happening and that the public is welcome to attend. Information on this virtual meeting is being uploaded to the city webpage as we speak, and in the interim, you can contact the developer directly at info@uplandscolorado.com or our senior city planner, Patrick Caldwell, who would be happy to assist. And finally, for our third meeting, it's regarding the upcoming City Council retreat this coming Saturday and Sunday, July 25th and 26th. And I'll ask now if Cody Blue Herb, who's our assistant to the city manager, could provide details on the virtual meeting, which is a city council session that will be open to the public, and that's on Saturday and Sunday. Cody, are you ready to go?
I am here. Thank you, Deputy City Manager Jody Andrews, and thank you, Matt Williams, for adding this slide. We just wanted to share a quick overview with members of City Council and the public, a reminder for the upcoming retreat, and then to confirm some logistics. As a reminder, Saturday morning, the better half, 2/3 of the day will be focused on team building and the governance retreat. Mike Condiff will lead this session, talking about your DISC profiles and really building that team with City Council. We'll also go through the Code of Conduct protocols document and make some necessary updates and changes there based on your feedback. Later in the afternoon on Saturday, we'll do a quick review of the strategic plan, giving a status update since the COVID pandemic has affected our operations. We'll look through the feedback from the community on a recent survey focused on the vision statement and start the dialogue around that conversation, as well as begin to review the community survey that you received as a presentation at the, I believe it was June 15th study session. On Sunday, we'll do some more work on the vision statement. If we need to, some more work around the community survey, and then really get down into focusing on the 2021 budget policy priority setting. The agenda memo will be posted later this week, I believe on Thursday, and the meeting will be hosted in a GoToMeeting so all faces can be on the screen. The meeting will be available to the public just as regular council meetings are through the YouTube link. I will be preparing binders for each of you with all of the materials and hope to be dropping them off at your homes on Friday afternoon. Those will include also the presentation the budget team's putting together for Sunday, hence the delay till Friday afternoon. The agenda memo will have all of the materials as well. If you have any questions, I hope to get them to you early enough Friday that you can call and ask for additional items. That's all I have.
Thank you, Cody. Mayor Pro Tem and City Council, that concludes the city manager's comments for this evening. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Andrews, I think Mr. DeMott has a question on your comment.
I do quickly. On the report, and I think this is not something that's come up before, but I'm curious about it with the face coverings. And this is something that maybe we could follow up with later, but I'm curious if any of the tracking we're doing of data, if we're looking to see if, as we go forward, especially now that there's a state mandate on face coverings, if we see any change in the data over the next 2 to 4 weeks, as far as, is that making an impact? I saw some numbers out of California, which, if you knew this or not, they did their face covering, I think, mid-June. And it doesn't look like, they tapered off much. So I'm just curious what impact we think that has on the city, especially since we probably do have some data for a while, since ours has been in place for some time versus the state. And I think that would be interesting information for the council to know ongoing.
Mayor, Jody Andrews again. Councilor DeMott, thank you. Excellent question and observation. I'll ask later on in the evening if Max Kirschbaum can address what he can of what we're seeing in the data so far. And then we will be keeping an eye on, of course, our data moving forward. But that's very helpful perspective to keep in mind as we track that data. So thank you for that. We will monitor.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, any other questions on the city manager's report? All right, seeing nothing. Mr. Andrews, would you go ahead and then introduce who's going to lead item number 1, please?
Yes, thank you. If I could just call on staff to come forward and begin that introduction. I believe it's Chris Lindsay.
Thank you, Jody. This is Assistant City Manager Chris Lindsay. Staff is available tonight to give City Council a debrief on the 2020 legislative session. Here tonight to speak to you is Amy Atwood from Atwood Public Affairs and Becky Long from Siegel Public Affairs. They're the city's contract lobbyists at the state capitol. Also available are Teresa Bocco and John Prasner, city staff who've worked with Amy and Becky and our internal stakeholders this legislative session. I would invite Amy and Becky to go ahead and unmute, and while they're doing that, I would just say we had a busy and a different legislative session this year due to the impacts of COVID-19, but also due to national events, I think, that became very involved in the state legislative session, and we're going to try and hit those items for you tonight. So with that, I would invite Amy and Becky.
Great, thank you. This is Amy. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, Amy Atwood, Atwood Public Affairs. We want to start first by saying thank you. It has been another interesting and unique year representing the city of Westminster. Again, staff was incredible, all staff, not just Chris and his team, but every department that gave feedback. The city staff is always so responsive that we are one of the first always to get comments back. And it seems that, you know, that just puts you right at the top when it comes to comments. So we want to thank everyone for that. We all know what the last 7 months have been like. You have our report, which is much more detailed, but we wanted to start with, there were two distinct parts of the session. We had over 700 bills that were introduced. We actively monitored 132 for the city and took positions on 8. The legislature was in until mid-March and things were humming along normal, just humming along same pace. The budget was supposed to come out the following week. Then they went into recess until May. And during that time, leadership and chairs, committee chairs, and legislators determined the priorities, what would move forward, what wouldn't, and the budget was rewritten during that time. We're going to go through some highlights of things that happened this session that impact the city and that are important to your overall objectives. Becky, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and hopefully folks can hear me okay now. I think, as Amy said, it was certainly an interesting session, and I was grateful to get to work with y'all, especially as we're all navigating so much uncertainty. So appreciate that we've been able to continue doing that. You know, I think Amy and I have talked a lot about how there's sort of the pre-COVID and post-COVID slice of the legislative session. And, you know, a lot of that breaks down to what we thought would happen and sort of what then ended up happening. So I'm going to start with a couple issues that I think seemed like a lot more might happen in the early days of session and leading into session, and sort of now facing uncertainty going forward. And then we'll talk through some of the other bills that were brought specifically to address some of the pandemic issues and economic issues, and then look forward quickly. So we started this year thinking that there might be much more happening on transportation this year. As we've seen for several years, you know, how to solve the transportation funding problem in Colorado continues to be elusive for our state legislators as well as voters who've, you know, proposed and rejected and supported and not passed multiple ballot measures. It did seem like there might be some funding in the budget that could be dedicated towards transportation this year, as had happened in the last couple of years. And there's been increasing chatter about shifting how we think about funding different elements of our transportation system, thinking about updating the gas tax or what that looks like going forward, thinking about the role of autonomous and electric vehicles, and trying to think about modernizing our transportation funding structure. All of that was sort of quietly percolating, and you know, there was some thinking that we would see something in the late session on that issue, but with the COVID crisis, it just very quickly became clear there would not be funding at the state level for that. And given all the other things that folks were dealing with, that really wouldn't be a priority. The one slice of things that kept kind of continuing to seem like something might happen was the RTD policy. As you all know, there was a bill introduced to think about RTD accountability. After a lot of discussion, there was almost 2 bills introduced on that, actually. That bill was introduced went away, but conversations around RTD accountability continued, especially in light of the significant federal dollars that RTD received through relief funds, and really wanting to make sure there was some accountability on how those were spent, as well as ongoing questions. That ultimately resulted in the RTD committee, which Councilwoman Seitz spoke to earlier, and I won't keep rehashing. We'll be following that through the summer. I think we anticipate they'll meet about monthly, and the committee is tasked with coming up with some interim suggestions come December for what could maybe be done at RTD to think about longer term sustainability and accountability. And then we'll have a final report due a year from now, and we might see additional changes. In speaking with both legislators who championed that issue and were involved in the announcement this week, they are both pretty committed that if something concrete doesn't come out of that committee, if that committee sort of doesn't take their charge seriously, or if RTD doesn't take the committee seriously, they'll still look at bringing legislation next year. So I do think we'll keep our ear to the ground for more information on that for sure. So we can circle back for questions in a moment, but I'll also touch just quickly on the environment. I think we saw in early session a number of bills introduced, especially around single-use plastics. That became a bigger issue last year as well. We saw a number of things around the state organic plans, banning certain types of single-use plastics or styrofoam, changing how some of them might happen at a local level, including local preemption around these issues. We also saw some things around pesticides and other emerging contaminants. We saw a lot of conversation around air quality and water quality with a specific focus on PFAS. Most all of those bills went away, and the ones that remained were significantly amended in light of the economic and public health crisis that the state faced. So all of the plastics bills were PI'd for the year. Many bills around energy efficiency and other policies that were pending introduction or had only recently been introduced went away. A few policies that were pretty discrete, which had maybe come out of an interim committee around consumer protections and some of those other things, did proceed, but by and large, most things in that space were changed pretty dramatically. We saw a couple things in the air quality space, mostly around department funding, fines for violations, and some reverse 911 requirements for certain facilities. But otherwise, everything really did shift. The PFAS legislation changed pretty dramatically as well. We had a number of concerns about how that would actually be implemented and potential costs on our local communities. All of that really sort of went away in those months where we were on recess. I think we do expect that a lot of those conversations will be revisited as the state departments and public health folks struggle to figure out what they're going to do around PFAS and how to regulate it, both under policies that have been passed and also under policies that have been proposed for the state. So a lot in those spaces that sort of clicked off quickly. I think there's a lot of questions and conversations about what will happen next. Those conversations will certainly be informed with how the public health crisis plays out, as well as the budget. And I'll kick it to Amy to talk about the budget.
Okay, thanks, Becky. So with the budget, we started the session, things were normal. It looked like that the budget would have a cushion of about $50 million. And that meant that was with inflation, enrollment, and caseload all being covered and taken care of. So there was 50 million at the end, 25 million per chamber to be split by 4 caucuses. That quickly changed to a $3.3 billion shortfall. So the Joint Budget Committee had to rewrite the budget in a very short period of time. If you think that they used the entire interim to work on the budget and hear from departments, and they had a very limited time, and they like to also do it out in public with their discussions in public. So during that interim time, staff was doing a lot of work to rework the numbers, but decisions all needed to be made in the public space. So when they came back in, Joint Budget Committee was still working on the budget, did not introduce it right away, but in the end they did. COVID relief money, as you all know, has to be spent on COVID-related expenses or impacts. So that is not a big backfill to the state budget. Same with school finance. This year, Council had asked us to report back on education funding, K-12 funding. And K-12 saw a shortfall of about $550 million. Now, there's quite a bit coming in for COVID related to K-12 education. But again, if that can get spent, we will see. We often hear about the negative factor when it comes to education funding, and the negative factor went from $4.5 million to $1.1 billion. The reason why education was hit so hard, as well as higher ed, is because those budgets are not so dependent on federal match. So when it comes to Medicaid and some of the human services, there isn't room there to make cuts, because then the cuts are exacerbated when the federal money then doesn't come in. So we knew higher education and K-12 would be hit really hard. Then we wanted to move into COVID-related bills. These bills had not been introduced before the recess, but some of the concepts have been in the works for many years. And to name off a few, sick leave for employees, sick leave, workers' comp, price gouging, whistleblower protections. So those concepts, and in other states across the country, those bills have passed. And so this was also an opportunity for agenda bills to pass with this, in this environment. Sick leave was one that we worked on closely and monitored closely for the city. There was also housing assistance money, and affordable housing is a priority for the city. And through the COVID dollars, more money was put into affordable housing, as well as the cuts to affordable housing are manageable. The industry or that stakeholder group feels it is manageable. They were not totally wiped out like some other line items were wiped out in the budget. Anything that was cash funded was those cash funds were moved over into the general fund. One that I wanted to highlight that I had said before was workers' comp. That bill ended up dying, but we do expect to see something around workman's comp to come back in 2021. And this rolls into many of the bills that died this year. The sponsors asked for committees to postpone indefinitely their bills, either because it wasn't mission critical or the money just wasn't there. That doesn't mean that all of those bills are really, really dead. Legislators will go back and revisit their bills and see, is there a way to do it under the budget constraints that we will have in the years to come. So if some of the things that we tracked that were important that did die, we will work and help to resurrect if we can. Let's see. Okay, we wanted to then move on to looking ahead. We're through the primaries. We're now right in the swing of the election cycle. We know who's running and where. Campaigns are definitely up and running. There are a number of issue campaigns that are out there. There was a deadline on 7/10 for signatures to be turned in. The next one is August 1st, I believe. August 3rd. Siegel Public Affairs has put together a nice spreadsheet that we shared with Chris and his staff that they can share on with you about what is still alive in that issue campaign space. One that we wanted to highlight for you was the Gallagher repeal. Now that was a referred measure from the legislature, so it is definitely going to be on the ballot, and it's a straight repeal of Gallagher, as well as deals with the legislature's authority to set the residential assessment rates. It is very complicated language, and there is not a funded campaign behind it. So that right now, that one looks like it could be tough to pass just with its wording, but it does start with without raising taxes. So that always helps when a ballot measure is trying to pass. That was the one that we wanted to highlight for you. So we have, oh, and the last thing for looking forward to next session is Becky and I talked a lot about this today, that our gut tells us it's not going to be a regular 120-day session. We all don't know what next year, January through May, will look like. We are anticipating that it won't be a normal session. And so we are talking through plans and contingencies, and we'll present that to, or talk about that with staff so that we can learn from what happened this year and how could we all make it better going forward and still be successful with the city's priorities when it comes to legislation. Okay, so we've talked a lot for 15 minutes. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Amy, I've got one set of questions from Councilor Sykes.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. This was in regards to the PFAS legislation. I'm looking for my question real quick. But essentially, I know it said that there was a late amendment that took some of the liability away from local governments and water providers. And I wanted to understand if we have standards and we find that we have a hot hit, right? So we're exceeding that standard. What is the remedy? Who has to pay for the treatment or the removal of the PFAS?
That is indeed the question. The legislation last year, says the state needs to be testing and figuring this out. The legislation that was proposed this year of 1119, in effect, and I don't know that that was completely the intent, put the obligation on the person who found the problem in some ways. The state was really open to shifting that and addressing that as an issue. It wasn't the intent. And so as of now, I think most of that liability has been pulled back, but it's a bit of an unresolved area where there's a lot of question about that. And it would likely be up to, different entities proving where it came from. So far in Colorado, we know where the places that have tested positive have come from. It's been the Air Force Base. That's the good news, is the places they found high levels, it is easy to know where it's coming from. That has been a central question that the state is struggling with. And I think we will see additional legislation trying to address that. Ultimately, I think they'd like to put it on whoever caused the pollution. That is the intent and the goal of the state. With PFAS, given the lifespan that the chemicals can have, that could be very difficult to do.
Correct, right? Can you refresh my memory? PFAS has what is its lifespan? Do you know? I mean, it doesn't break down very readily, so it's hard to tell if it was dropped in the lake.
Often referred to as forever pollution, because it can be hundreds and thousands of years.
So from a public health perspective, I think it's very important that there's a standard set. And that is my second question. Do we know when the Solid and Hazardous Waste Commission will set that standard?
I do not know. I actually am trying to touch base with them later this week about a few issues, so I will let you know what I hear from them. I've not gotten an update on their timing there.
And my best guess is that that will be, as data driven as possible. Are they also going to have community outreach for that? Are you aware?
I believe they'll
have input rather.
Under the Administrative Procedure Act, they will have to do some of that around rulemakings. They'll have to notice those as rules, and announce that to all interested stakeholders. How exactly that looks right now is probably a series of webinars if it matches other CDPHE conversations I've been tracking.
Yeah, right. So yeah, understood. It's another layer of complexity. And then please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding about why who pays is kind of fraught is this isn't a federally regulated pollutant, correct? So you don't have like CERCLA or anything. Are there thoughts to try to, on a state level, create a similar, chain of responsibility as that on a state level for this pollutant?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some of the legislation this year and last year, some of the proponents were hoping to do that, and felt like they may have last year. I think it perhaps was not as clearly defined as it needed to be when it goes as far as maybe a CERCLA type bill, which extra credit for referencing, arcane federal acronyms, council member. I think that is the kind of conversation the state is having, is the state doesn't have money to pay for the cleanup and local governments don't have that kind of money potentially. And if there's not federal dollars, where do we find that? And so I think this is going to be something Colorado and other states continue to struggle with, especially while there's a lack of federal component to this as well. So I don't have any.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I'm just expressing, I think the public health benefit of limiting it and setting that standard is really valuable, but I also want to monitor and make sure that Westminster residents as taxpayers aren't taking on an undue burden. So I guess I'm imagining hopefully this will continue this conversation next year and we'll look for a more equitable, permanent, secure solution. So, but thank you. Those were my questions on that one.
And we'll keep an eye on that and certainly let staff know as we hear more about rulemakings and such.
All right, Mr. Lindsay, you had a question, and I'll go to the next council member after yours.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, if we could wait until after the questions, I can address that.
All right, Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, thanks to Amy and Becky for their work at the Capitol, especially this year. I appreciate that, and assisting Mr. Lindsay's team also. You mentioned that next year's 120-day session was going to have a different feel. I was wondering if that's just going to be in the feel and the process, or if you believe there'll be another move to extend past the constitutional limit of 120 days.
Well, that's a really good question. That is what is all up in the air. I think if we are under a public health crisis emergency like we are now, and there's legislative business that still needs to continue, I could see the legislature going to the courts again and asking for that. But we just don't know how long it'll go. I don't know. Becky, your turn.
Well, I guess what I would add is, when I say not a normal 120-day session, I don't necessarily mean it'll be, well, I think in some ways we don't know what that means yet, right? In my brain, that's not necessarily extended all through this summer, though with the court decision this year and potentially, similar conversations next year, we could see a different timeline. I think more than that, it won't look like it has historically. Maybe they're in sessions for 2 weeks and then they take a 2-week break and then maybe they come back. Maybe there's a pause to make sure there's not an outbreak at the Capitol before they come back. Maybe they're staggering which committees are meeting. So 1 week it's all the education committees and the next week it's the transportation committees. I don't think we know that yet, but I know that the legislative leadership is thinking about that a lot and trying to figure out what might work. It's hard. There's not a perfect system and it's an inherently public process. And I think there's members on both sides of the aisle that want to make sure there's public access to that process. And if you do that and follow these public health guidelines, it can be complicated, as we saw. The state also doesn't have a way for the public to participate in committee hearings, to give testimony remotely, other than in limited situations at higher education campuses. So I couldn't give testimony from my home, for example. That's something that's been discussed. So I think we will hear more about it through the fall. Given some term limits and changes to the membership of the legislature, there will be at least some new leadership at the state capitol, particularly in the House. And those members may have different vision for what they want to see or do than the folks did this year. And they still want to get things done, and they want to, go get to work, and they have to pass a budget. And so that's complicated. So that's maybe a little more of sort of what we're thinking when we shorthand it. Does that mean that we're done in May? I don't think we know yet. I, for one, vote to not be in the building past May because it starts to get real hot, and I get real cranky, but I'm not the boss of it, unfortunately, Councilmember Seymour.
Yeah, unfortunately, those windows don't open very well in the Capitol to begin with, so it's not pleasant down there.
No, and there's a renewable resource of hot air.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this report. It was good to read. I like the voice in it. It sounded like you both writing this. So thank you for your work and everything that you're doing. There were a couple questions that I had reading the report. One was, I'm curious as to why we didn't have particular key races that are happening in Westminster. In regards to HD 35 with Lindsay Dougherty and Vanessa DeMott, and then for HD 29, or sorry, that was HD 29, and then HD 35, Shannon Bird and Roger Lehman. I didn't notice that in the report, so it just kind of came to mind. The other one was for the 217, just wanted to see what your thoughts were on tracking that. I didn't hear that in the presentation that y'all gave. And then the last question was in particular to, and this might be for staff to answer, for the sick leave for employees, what does that look like now, and what would that look like come January 1st, 2021, when that bill gets implemented?
Councilor Smith, this is Chris again. Let me jump right in. So I think your first question was about local races, and this being the legislative debrief, we haven't typically tracked those before. We're just addressing the bills that were before the legislative session. If that's something council would seek to add to this report moving forward, that is something we are open to. On 217, it's our understanding that there was an executive session to discuss the impacts of 217 last week. So staff with the lobbyists decided to focus our limited time with you this evening on the other items during the session. And I do think we went right up against our cap. If you have specific questions about 217, we're open to questions there relating to the legislative session. And
the sick leave.
Sick leave.
Yes.
I am going to ask Amy or John if you can answer that one, because I don't recall.
Could you just restate your question on sick leave, please?
Yep. So let me pull up my note here. Where are we at with sick leave for employees now, and how will this bill impact Westminster beginning January 1st, 2021?
I can take that, Amy.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is John Prisoner. So The sick leave will change who gets sick leave for the city. Currently, we don't anticipate there be any changes to our benefited employees, but there will be additional employees such as seasonals and part-timers that currently do not receive any pay time off that will receive that. But we're currently in the process of working with HR staff to determine what the impacts will be to the city and its staff.
Okay, thank you. And then to note for the races, they were in the report. It had key races to keep an eye on, and it listed it in the report. So I was curious why we missed some particular to Westminster in that report.
Counselor, could I jump in real quick? This is Amy. So those that we listed are what are considered targeted seats, swing seats. The two Westminster seats you spoke about are fairly safe seats. So that's why these were the 5 that were noted in the report. But going forward, we will add in that on key races to watch those Westminster seats, whether it's Senate.
I think it's important. Yeah. Sure. Thank you. I think it's just in addition to the key seats, I think it's also important to note what key seats are or what seats are up in Westminster, because it will ultimately impact our city. And then the other one for 217, I realized that we had a executive session. I didn't realize from a legislature point of view, from that docket, what that would look like and what we could share with the public on the 217 bill. I know that we'll have more discussions on that, but just from your point of view, what does that look like for 217? And is there any rumblings coming down that it might change or what it might look like? I realize that it's a bigger question than it is to answer. So.
Sure. Chris, would you like me to take this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what we're hearing is that the impacted local governments are looking at how to implement and combing through the legislation, because it did go fast. We have bills that pass in 2 weeks every session. There may be instances and language in the bill where it cannot be implemented the way it was written. So we may see a bill that comes back, or 2 or 3, they may do an omnibus if there are issues with the way it was drafted. That is what we're hearing.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. That's all my questions.
Mr. Bowles?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first, I want to thank Ms. Atwood and Ms. Long and our Westminster policy team for their work throughout this session. And I think the comment in your report that said each session is unique, but this is a session that this unique beats all uniques before that. So all previous unique. So it is true. This is a really interesting session, and thank you for all your hard work. And I know you had to adjust, and thank you for this report and keeping us in the loop throughout session. I had a couple quick questions on Senate Bill 51, the RTD accountability bill. I just want to confirm that there were major changes to disability policy in that original bill. That's all out, correct? They ditched that for now?
That whole bill died, yeah.
So that's okay. And then they came back with the MOU for accountability. Okay. Thank you for that. And then also House Bill 1332. Can you tell me a little bit about, I don't quite understand the point of it, prohibit housing discrimination regarding source of income. So I don't understand that bill. Did that pass? And then what is it about?
Sure. I'm just pulling up my notes.
Or I guess the intent of the bill. I tried to read the first synopsis of the bill, and I don't know if I still understand it.
Okay.
What they're trying to do, the intent.
The source of income was some folks believe that they are being discriminated against because of their source of income if they're Section 8. And so what the bill does, it says that you cannot discriminate based upon someone's source of income, whether it's alimony, child support, anything outside of a regular job. So that is the intent of that bill. It passed a little bit bipartisan, not a lot bipartisan, but there was support on both sides.
Okay, good.
And this was a bill that we had seen for 2 years prior. So it had really been worked out with the apartment association and different owners.
Okay, good. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I couldn't figure out exactly what the intent was on that. So thank you. That is perfectly clear now. Thank you. I think you said in your report that there will not be, because of COVID-19, there will not be interim committees. And interim committees is where so much of the work of the legislature gets done, where they kind of negotiate and kind of a little give and take before session. Will we be starting session, or will the legislature start session really far behind with the fact that they won't be? So I guess, what are your predictions, basically, just kind of a theory? How will this affect our upcoming session when we're not able to have members of our legislature talking to one another through the interim committee process?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we saw in the years following the 2008 recession, where we faced such serious budget challenges, we saw interim committees suspended then as well. Certainly it limited some room for exploration and conversations on these issues, but I think in my experience in those years, people still kind of found a way to collaborate, reach out to different stakeholders. It puts maybe more of the onus on individual legislators and or individual interest groups who are pursuing a concept than the platform you might get with interim committee. But a lot of that does still happen. It's maybe less easy to suss out and find just as a passerby. But we will do a lot of work to reach out to legislators and figure out what their priorities look like, talk through, what that could mean, and bring back as much of that as early as possible. I think, we're at least assuming that will be a big part of what we do all summer, is chase down kind of gossip and info and what we're hearing and try to set up those conversations. I think the other wrinkle, which is something that happens every few years, is we will have a set of new legislators coming in. There is a lot of seats where someone who's been in the House will be maybe going to the Senate, so they're a known entity, but there will also be a number of new legislators who are running in open seats in particular, and then certainly we may see some upsets of incumbents at some point. So those are probably the place that are always the challenge, is someone has been in campaign mode for months and months and then has to go to being a legislator overnight and having their bills ready in about a 5-6 week period. So that's probably the bigger challenge in some ways. Folks who typically participate in the interim committees are pretty good at sharing what they're thinking. Folks who are maybe campaigning haven't even had time to think about how to take a campaign promise and turn it into a bill. So we will be doing a lot of talking to people and tracking down ideas and info we're hearing all summer, for sure.
That's a big part of your job, right? Tracking down those gossips, all that gossip at the Capitol and out and about.
I found a way to make a gossip part of what I do for a living. It's wild. Who knew?
That's amazing. Good for you. Well, thank you very much for this report. I appreciate it. And thanks for all your hard work, and thanks to our Westminster policy team for all of their work as well. Thank you, guys.
Mr. DeMott.
I, like Councilor Smith, had some of the same questions. 217, I'm surprised we're not going through it, just because I know we went through it in executive session, but I think that I had a request about going over that, and it sounds like maybe that might be forthcoming still. But there's quite a bit of detail that would have been nice, I think, to break down for the public, since it's now in a public agenda as far as what that bill does. Pretty important and impactful to the community. So hopefully we get something on that relatively soon, if we're not going to go through these points tonight. I had initially put my name in the queue because of that, though.
All right, and any other questions or comments from council on regards to item 1, the legislative session debrief? I'm seeing nothing coming up from any of the council members. Mr. Andrews, let's move to item 2.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
could I
now you can
circle
answer.
back around?
Yeah, now you can go back. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Chris again. Last week, Mayor Pro Tem Sites shared with council the Colorado Communities for Climate Action policy statement. Due to their bylaws, I believe Mayor Pro Tem Sites would like to make sure there are no concerns amongst council before they ask the folks on the board of directors, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Pro Tem Sites, if we have any objections. So due to the timing of the legislative item tonight, wanted to circle back around with that for her. I would just add, and she added in her note, the city staff have reviewed the policy statement, have no concerns with what's on that.
I would turn it over maybe to Lindsay. She serves on the policy committee, and so she had been with them as they went through it. We've already had, as the board of directors, none of us had any concerns. That what I presented to you was kind of agreed to by the folks that serve on the board of directors, and then I just wanted to make sure you saw it and that we could ratify it. But I don't believe, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you had any concerns along the way either.
As far as I know, no, we had no concerns. I wasn't able to attend the annual retreat for this event, or for the CC4CA retreat. And I think the biggest item that they were looking to change was it not be a unanimous decision for this policy statement, but I believe that they had it be a unanimous. They kept that the same. So with that, I don't have much to add. It was fairly slow with COVID and other policy items that were on the docket that have then since been pushed since COVID. So I don't have any concerns with it. And yeah.
Well, I guess the question is, what is the ask that you're asking of council?
Same as we've done every year that we've been on council. So this is just the process. They go through the policy agenda, and every member community has to agree to the policy agenda. We as a body don't have to be unanimous, but it has to be unanimous among all of their members. And so just wanting to make sure everyone's behind it.
I think the key part of that was staff's reviewed it. Ms. Smith, who is a representative on the board, has indicated she doesn't see anything with it. Staff doesn't. Is there any objection from any member of council to move forward with what was recommended by the board? I've seen no objection. So Ms. Smith, I think you have your direction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, you're welcome. Mr. Andrews, go to number 2, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we receive a presentation of the Harris Park Community Vision Plan, I'll provide just a couple of introductory comments, and then I'll turn it over to Dave Downing, our Director of Community Development, to provide a bit more detailed introduction to the staff presentation. So before you tonight is a presentation on the Harris Park Community Vision Plan. That's a presentation requested by City Council and it's intended to provide background on a tabled staff recommendation regarding a contract amendment to complete this important community engagement effort in preparation for next steps. Although the city has a long history of capital projects and community and business liaison in this unique Westminster neighborhood, the city and the community has sometimes had difficulty identifying a shared sense of direction moving forward. What's exciting about the staff presentation tonight is that it talks about an open and transparent public process that is focused on gathering community-wide input and using that input to help establish a shared vision for the community. The input received in this process will give us clarity on what the community wants, opening a pathway for alignment and success on future efforts between the city, the community, and the private sector. At this point, I would ask Dave Downing if you could join me and provide additional comments before we receive the staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Jody, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, as requested, staff will make a presentation on the progress and status of the Harris Park Vision Plan. Staff did approach Council twice on April 27th and on June 8th with a request to amend the contract with the city's consultant to add approximately $34,000 to that contract for the purposes of providing additional community outreach and some visual aids to make the neighborhood as understandable as possible to future readers of the document. Staff recommends Council's authorization of the contract amendment, and our intent is to approach Council again with that request pending the outcome of tonight's discussion. Over the past 4 decades, it has been my privilege to have a front row seat to witness the installation of many tens of millions of dollars worth of city investment in public infrastructure improvements in and adjacent to the Harris Park neighborhood. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, most of those improvements were geared to make the area safe, safe from flooding damage, safe for motorists and pedestrians, and to provide safe as well as reliable drinking water and sanitary sewer systems. While additional safety enhancements will always be necessary, this plan is really aimed at defining what the people who live in the neighborhood envision is needed to make Harris Park livable and viable into the future. So with that, I will now introduce Nathan Lawrence, a senior planner with community development and a co-project manager for the preparation of the Harris Park Vision Plan, to begin our presentation. Nathan?
Great, thanks, Dave. Thank you, Matt. Thanks both to you, Dave and Jody, for providing that background. As you both mentioned, this is a neighborhood that the city is very invested in, and it's important to acknowledge those past efforts as they really lay the groundwork for the planning work that we have been engaged in over the last year and a half. And so with that, I'd like to say good evening to the city councilor and the mayor, and the city council and the mayor. I'm Nathan Lawrence, senior planner with community development. Tonight I'll be presenting a progress update on the Harris Park Community Vision Plan, a process that was begun early in 2019. My co-manager for this planning process, actually, Matt, can you go back? My co-manager for this planning process, Stephanie Troller, the business development manager with economic development, and primary staff liaison to the Harris Park neighborhood, will also be presenting with me tonight. I thank you for giving us the time to provide you with a high-level overview of what we have accomplished so far and where we are headed with this planning effort. You can switch slides, Matt. Creating a plan for Harris Park is currently identified as an action item in the city's strategic plan. As Dave mentioned in his introduction, the city has been closely involved with the neighborhood for decades and has made significant physical and programmatic investments, including streetscape enhancements, park improvements, infrastructure repairs, and grants to improve the businesses in the neighborhood core. The planning efforts that we began just last year are the next chapter in the city's partnership with the Harris Park community and aim to establish a solid foundation for future improvements to this unique and cherished neighborhood. Can you switch sides, Matt? But what is a vision plan? It is a plan that delivers a vision for the future and one that is rooted in public input. A key component of this plan is the vision statement. The community put a great deal of effort into developing this. It's at the top right of your screen. And if you could please take a moment to just read through it now. So this statement is the community's vision, and it represents consensus on physical improvements and the desired nature of future development. It's really what future character that the residents and business owners want to see in the future of their neighborhood. This plan is, in its essence, a comprehensive, community-supported, city-vetted approach to the revitalization of Harris Park and the preservation of its character. By engaging in open dialogue about the role that the city should play in the neighborhood, the vision planning process has also built trust between neighborhood residents, business owners, and the city, and will help ensure that future city investments align with this vision. Change sides, please. So why do we need a vision plan? Harris Park is an established community with a long history and a unique character. Most of Westminster's land area consists of master plan communities formed through the planned unit development process. Historic Westminster, and Harris Park in particular, was developed much more organically, resulting in a mix of uses, scales, civic spaces, and architectural styles. The vision planning process allows us to work hand in hand with community members and stakeholders to identify the character that is to be preserved and what things should change incrementally over time to create the desired future. Given the wide range of building and architectural styles, the creation of a documented shared vision also provides certainty for investors so that they can bring new infill development to the neighborhood, knowing that their proposals are in line with the community's vision. And from the city's perspective, the vision plan allows for capital projects and programs to be initiated that are supported by the community. This allows us then to allocate budgets in a manner that yields the most positive impact for Harris Park. The community has not been engaged in a wide conversation of what they want to be when they grow up. And this plan represents just that, the first comprehensive grassroots planning process for Harris Park. Stephanie will now provide you all an overview of the neighborhood engagement component, which really sits at the heart of this plan. Stephanie?
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Stephanie Trawler with the Economic Development Department. And as Nathan mentioned, I am going to talk to you about the public outreach component. Matt, could you please change? Thank you. So there are two components, primary components that we focused our public outreach efforts on. And the first of that is the formation of a focus group. The focus group consisted of a property owners, business owners, residents, nonprofit leaders, and then we're all asked to provide the team guidance about the process and provide us input at critical junctures throughout the process. You could see by the list of members here, there's a wide balanced representation from the neighborhood. These are the neighborhood stakeholders that are highly invested in the success of Harris Park. And again, they provided us with input throughout the process. Next slide, please, Matt. During the meetings, the focus group members were asked to set boundaries for the study area. This was pivotal. As a result of their input, the original historic plat for Harris Park was expanded to include areas south of 72nd and west of the Hidden Lake High School. These were areas that the members saw as critical gateways to their neighborhood, and they wanted attention brought to them. The focus group also recommended that we stretch the focus, the boundaries to include either side of Lowell, acknowledging that there's mixed uses along this corridor that acts as an extension to the commercial core. The group also identified opportunities for redevelopment and helped identify the physical characteristics that give the area its uniqueness, and therefore needed to be subdivided into nine different areas. These 9 areas were reviewed by the community and during the community workshops. The focus groups also guided and provided input for the workshops. We pitched our presentations to this group. They were provided the opportunity to accept or refine the process as we prepared for the larger groups. Next slide, please. The second component of the outreach was the 3 community workshops. These were attended by residents, business owners, property owners. There was extensive inclusivity efforts made to include the Spanish-speaking members of the community. We used translation services utilized. We used staff who were bilingual to help facilitate and make sure that all voices were heard during this process. We didn't want language or culture to be a barrier. These workshops were also attended by the city management, many of you city councilors, and the mayor. These workshops were facilitated by our consultant, Winter & Company, and a cross-functional team of staff facilitated tabletop meetings, engaging the community and facilitating conversation through the various workshops. There was high public attendance at all 3 meetings. There was over 80 in attendance at the Grange Hall in February. And that just speaks to the level of interest this community has for enhancing their neighborhood and moving things forward. The high turnout also speaks to the involvement from the focus group. They were charged to be our ambassadors and help spread the word to help boost the attendance. And I would say the attendance exceeded our expectations. Next slide, please. During these workshops, community members were engaged in a wide variety of tasks. To name a few, the first workshop, participants selected images of development styles to demonstrate appropriate land uses and densities in the different sub areas of the Harris Park boundaries. This gave the project team some pretty clear direction on their desire for future development style and patterns. In the second workshop, the community members prioritized the programming opportunities in public spaces, highlighting the potential for new uses and ongoing programming. In the third workshop, participants reviewed exhibits, summarizing the first plan draft, confirming the direction. Again, we sought out feedback, and this is the opportunity where residents were able to give us that feedback to shape the final plan. They also had the opportunity to comment on a set of implementation goals and objectives and actions that will be used to ensure that the future projects and policies move forward in the right direction. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Nathan. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Matt, can you switch to the next slide? The goals, objectives, and actions that Stephanie just mentioned form what I'm calling an implementation roadmap. This is a roadmap that is supported by the community, and importantly, one that has been thoroughly vetted by the city departments and divisions that work in the neighborhood. However, a vision plan only lays the groundwork for the future. We now have to help implement that vision in partnership with the community. But with consensus in hand, as spelled out in the vision plan, we can move forward quicker and with the confidence that our actions fit with what the community wants. Next slide, please. And we have already begun an implementation in anticipation of the final plan being accepted, knowing that this community wants action, not just more plans. We've begun work on a detailed prioritization matrix that identifies partners and funding sources and anticipates project timelines. The design principles embedded in the plan have already been put to use in review of some upcoming development projects in the core study area. We are currently in the process of vetting capital projects in preparation for upcoming budget and grant requests. But in the meantime, we've identified some low-hanging fruit that will be implemented quickly using existing budget allocations. One example is a host of pedestrian safety enhancements that are already planned and funded. These include improvements to the pedestrian crossings at 72nd and Bradburn, 72nd and Irving, and 73rd and Lowell next to the high school. These were intersections that were identified by the community and documented in the plan. The city is also planning to add pedestrian bulb outs at 73rd and Lowell and extend streetscape enhancements down Lowell towards 72nd Avenue. These improvements were also specifically identified by the community during the plan's outreach process. Also, a detailed analysis of the neighborhood's parking inventory is currently underway, which will provide us with very valuable information and recommendations on how to maximize existing parking resources to support the new shops and restaurants that the community strongly desires. During the community workshops, we received a great deal of positive feedback on the addition of new art pieces in the core area. So the strengthening of this rich existing art network will continue and will utilize the vision plan to guide and maximize the impact of future investments in art. Also, work related to the rezoning of the core area has also begun, acknowledging the community's desire to remove red tape to allow for new infill development that fits in with the scale and character of the existing neighborhood. The vision plan will also provide input into ongoing Westminster forward planning efforts, including the comprehensive plan update, 2021 transportation mobility plan, the Parks Recreation Libraries plan, Code Forward, and the development of various other city policies. Next slide, please, Matt. So what are the next steps from here? As I mentioned, we currently have a draft version of the plan, one that has incorporated a great deal of staff input and a ton of community feedback. The next step is for the final community review of this draft. Outreach will likely be online in the form of a virtual community workshop, given the safety concerns surrounding COVID-19. This virtual workshop will require additional consulting services in line with previous workshop efforts and forms part of the budget supplement that CD is requesting. It should be noted that given the high level of interest and participation in this planning process overall, additional outreach meetings were added to the original project scope to ensure that everyone's voice was heard. This final virtual workshop is an example of this additional outreach, which we felt was very critical and further adds to the transparency of the planning process. Following the virtual workshop, staff will need to incorporate community feedback to create a final draft. New, expanded 3D graphics will also need to be included, and that forms another part of the new budget request. As Stephanie had mentioned, the community's desire to expand the study area beyond what we had originally scoped to encompass areas outside of the Harris Park core, increased our budget for graphics, but was in direct response to what the community wanted. These graphics will provide a bird's eye perspective of the future of Harris Park and will be used as a key marketing tool for the area to show potential investors. Once all of this work is done, the final draft of the vision plan will be ready for presentation to the Planning Commission before being presented to you for your hopeful acceptance. And with that, that concludes our update on the Harris Park Community Vision Plan. Thank you again for listening.
All right, guys, we have a couple of people in the queue for questions. I'll start with Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, staff, for this great presentation. I really did appreciate it. As you mentioned that we were going to do some more outreach with the final plan online to seek a little bit more final feedback, and I have a concern about that. This is an area that has a population that doesn't always have access to internet or opportunity to utilize computers due to age and sometimes financial status. And I'm concerned that we may be missing a large population that would have a lot of input on that plan. And I understand COVID and I don't have an answer. I wish I had an answer, but I am concerned that we're going to do this online and not do something else. Like, I don't know if we could do it in a park, or if we could send out the plan in the mail, or I don't know how else to reach residents, but I am concerned about the online component. And so that would be my only question and concern.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scully.
Councilor Scully, it's Dave Downing. That's a point well taken. I appreciate your comment. We will take a look at what other options we might have. I think you're right on target when, coming down to the final look and approval of the plan. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to comment, and we're right with you on that one. I don't know if Stephanie Troller has anything to add. She's our liaison with the neighborhood, but I think it might be best just to say we will take a close look at what options we might have to a virtual meeting.
Thank you.
Ms. Sykes.
So thank you so much. I want to say thank you to staff for all of the previous work that you've already done towards the Harris Park plan. Being one of the counselors who helped getting updating the Harris Park plan in the strategic plan, it feels good to see how much progress we've had towards that aim, and that we've taken an approach that is truly grassroots up versus top down. So I appreciate the effort to make meaningful community outreach and input the cornerstone of this approach and of this reimagining. That said, I have to tell you, I have been supportive of continuing and expanding the contract since it's been brought before us twice. And the reason being is we as counselors consistently hear a narrative that residents in historic Westminster do feel left behind or forgotten. I don't feel that is accurate, but I do feel that we would be affirming it if after all of these citizens' hours, all of their energy, all of their thoughts, and their desire to help us really figure out what is the best plan going forward, if we were to drop that. I think that we need to show our consistent desire to invest in our community. And I do believe that historic Westminster is, an under-leveraged asset that we really have in this community. So I am going to continue to want to support this. I think Councilor Scully hit a really good point where COVID has really pronounced the digital divide. And so whatever final community input that we probably need to figure out multiple pathways to make sure all residents really get a chance to put their stamp of approval on it. But I continue to be supportive, and I appreciate all of the work that's been done, not just from our staff, not just from our consultants, but from the many residents who have been involved along the way.
Other comments from council? Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this was not, we were in a position when this came before us and we asked for some more information on that, is to see where we were at as part of the plan. I do not want to any way minimize the incredible amount of work that's gone into this plan, and also thank all the residents who've been deeply invested in this plan also. But I also would like to discuss the fact that since we're looking at budget dollars, and we're looking at $34,000 more on this for graphics works, state the plan. We're in a situation where we're unable to come up with $60,000 to have an election to listen to what our residents say. So that's my concern on this, is I'm looking at every single dollar and where it's best spent. I look forward to us continuing to work with all the residents in the historic Westminster Harris Park neighborhood. I think we have a great group of people that sit on that, and I think they can move forward without some of the additional outreach, because it's been substantial since February of 2019.
Are there other council members who've not had an opportunity to speak that would like to comment?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor DeMott. I will, but I'd like to hear what Councilor Seitz has to say before I make my comments.
All right, well, go ahead and put yourself in the queue then, if you will, please. All right, Ms. Seitz.
Thank you, Councilor DeMott, and I did not mean to go again before, take another bite at the apple before allowing you an opportunity to. I did just want to really quick correct what I think was maybe a mischaracterization. Members of the council were concerned in COVID about putting a budget in the budget and on the ballot, a question about wards and districts at this time, not because of the initial cost just to run the election, but contemplating that if the voters were to say yes, that would be a massive, potentially very large budget, very large scale investment of employee time and hiring consultants to look at what it would look like to equitably divide up our community in wards and districts. Fundamentally, changing the way that we are governed is a very significant step that would take a significant amount of thought and planning. And really, we'd want to do it right before then, after we got the results of that study, refer a measure to the ballot again. So it is not just a one-part $60,000 investment. That would be the first of 3 steps. So I think that was a little oversimplification from where the rest of council fell.
All right, Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of things. First, I am concerned about the actual input, and so I've had some concerns that I've raised about this over a while, not because I don't think that we should be investing in every portion of the city, but I'm concerned about some of the feedback that I've heard from some of those members who were on that list. Also, from understanding how many people in those meetings were even from the Harris Park area. I did attend those meetings. I know that some of those, one of the biggest meetings they had down at the Grange was actually prior to Councilor Smith and Seymour both being elected to office, and we had Councilor Mankey and Haney with us at one of those meetings, and a great turnout. But I saw a lot of faces that I know aren't from that part of town. So I do have some concern about that. One of my other concerns that I raised before is this a tangible plan that has actions in it that we're actually going to do? And the reason that I've brought this up many times is the fact that there's been multiple plans, some of which this consultant group, from my understanding, even had a portion in, that didn't come to fruition. I'm trying to understand some of the points that are on here as far as like bulb outs. That's actually something that I've heard a lot of complaints about from that part of town. Some of the other things that I've heard as far as like what they really actually are looking for is us taking care of things like infrastructure. I saw you did call that out, which I appreciate. You know, so I'm trying to understand and match this with, you know, what the extra work is going to be. Is this going to be a tangible plan? And does it truly have the fingerprints of that original Harris Park area on it? You know, lastly on that point, and I'll let staff respond, and then I have a couple other thoughts in response to Councilor Seitz. The other thing that I think about is what we're doing for the small business community in that area and how that is in the plan. And maybe you could speak to, you know, portions of this that you guys are already thinking. I think that one of the things that comes straight to mind is the creative corner. So that's something we've consistently, you know, I think even back again to Councilor Mankey and Haney, where we all sounded like we wanted to figure out how we could help businesses such as that. I don't know the status of that particular business at this point. As far as I know, they're operating. I don't know at what capacity, but you know, they come to mind as an opportunity for us to invest in that part of the city and be able to see these small businesses that are consistent with the character of that neighborhood spring up.
Mr. Andrew, you have, or Mr. Downing, you have somebody you want to respond to Mr. DeMott's initial comment?
This is Dave Downing. I'll respond to at least a portion of it regarding the purpose of spending the additional $34,000 and perhaps a little insight on why that's important. I think it is really important that we not cut the plan off right now. That's what would have to happen if we couldn't continue. We would stop where we are, more or less. We could try to wrap up a few loose ends, but you know, having that final opportunity for engagement with the residents is of utmost importance. You mentioned, Councilor DeMott, you mentioned one example, something about bulb outs and how you've heard some feedback that they're not desired. I think that's the kind of thing we want to flesh out in this final round of community engagement. Make sure that everyone understands, here's a proposal, here's what staff heard from feedback. Is this indeed what the neighborhood wants? Also, I think in a effort like this, the most important thing you can do is make sure that you document results at the end. And that's why we're asking for some money for additional the visual aids. You know, this is a tough, you know, you're talking about people's vision. Well, that you can't write specifications for that. You're going to have to do it in a bit more obtuse manner. And we think that visual aids is the best way to get the message across to future readers of the plan about what the community really had in mind. We're just not staffed properly to provide those kind of visual aids to help document the results at the end. So that's why, those are the main reasons why we would strongly recommend to council that we authorize the contract amendment so that we can be sure of the concurrence of the neighborhood in all aspects of the plan, and to provide great documentation for what was intended. With that,
could I actually ask a follow-up question on that specific portion of my comments? So what I'm wondering, and so I understand what you're saying, that those visual aids would be helpful to show residents some of those things as you gather this final pieces of feedback to understand if it's what they want. So I guess that kind of a hanging point for me is, if I think through that, if I'm already hearing some feedback that some of the stuff that they're seeing come out of some of those meetings is less than desirable to a good portion of people who live in that area. Is there some pre-steps that we could do to see if we could flush some of that out without spending the additional money on the graphics from a staff level, without the consultants, to try to minimize costs and work?
I'll take a shot at that, but I'll invite either Nathan or I believe Andrew Spurgeon's on the line also to weigh in also. Certainly it's a good idea to make sure that we don't unnecessarily spend money on graphics that miss the target altogether. And I would think that your suggestion is a good one, and that is that we have some engagement before we spend all of that money that we're asking for the graphics. Gentlemen, do you have anything else to add to that?
I could jump in quick. It's Nathan, senior planner. I think we definitely, throughout this whole process, we were checking and rechecking. I think that that's really critical, and that's really a big reason why we kind of want to do this final check, Mr. DeMott, just to make sure, to triple make sure, really. But this isn't, it's not fair to say that this is the first visual that they'll actually be seeing. We actually presented in the third workshop a series of illustrative drawings that were done by our consultant, and were sort of blown up and put on boards. And we had people edit, and they did make a few changes, but overwhelmingly everyone said yes, this is what it looked like. So I think, we also have to be aware that there are going to be some people who aren't going to agree with everything. It's impossible to get 100% consensus, but I strongly feel that based on the sort of high level of attendance and input, especially at that third workshop where we really were focusing on, here's the sort of rough draft. Does this all work? And we got a few tweaks here and there, but we generally, I think, got it right. And so I think, we can definitely explore opportunities for some virtual input, perhaps, but I do feel that, the direction that the graphics are headed in, or the sort of form of development there, is what a majority of the people that participated agreed with and saw as their vision.
And I understand that, and I guess this is one of the frustrating things, probably both from your side and the position I find myself in on this issue. I am absolutely have said that I feel like we need to do more for the historic part of the city. And I think that one of the things that I've consistently heard is people checking out. And as we go through these process, yeah, we have good feedback, but we have some of longtime community members from different corners of that area who have checked out because they do not feel that their voice is being heard. And I don't know what portion that is, but I know that it's more than a few people that have brought it up to me. And being somebody who's elected to represent their voice, I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up. I think one of the other things, that is hard when we look at spending dollars on an area where we have, a good amount of city property, that we get some complaints about how we cared for it. And so I think one of the other themes that I've heard a lot from community members in that area is about us making sure that we take care of those properties. And I think it's even something I brought up a couple times that we've had this discussion on this item, is making sure that we are taking care of the things that we're in our stead. So it's difficult for me to balance another $35,000 when I know we have needs down in that area. The last thing that I would bring up, and in response to Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, I understand what you're saying, and I don't think anybody in this council has any thought in their head that if we put that measure on the ballot, it wouldn't end up being substantially more in the long run than $60,000 that it would take to put it on the ballot now. It was a starting point of conversation. And as I saw it, I think that, that could have come back and the citizens could say, we don't want that. And I think it's a really relevant piece to bring up, because this particular area to me is one area where I've got probably the most feedback about wanting to have the question of wards and districts asked. So it makes it additionally hard when we weren't able to come to consensus on that question. I hope that we will come to consensus like we agreed for next year, although this year would have been my preference, but I do think that there's some validity to Councilor Seymour's comments as far as the $35,000 in addition to this, in light of the conversation and money being part of why we did say we wanted to push it off in addition to COVID. But money certainly was an issue that was given to those of us who wanted to push that this year. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Vols.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of my colleagues already made really good points, so I'll be as brief as I can. I want to just say I thoroughly support 110% investment in the Harris Park community and in that neighborhood. I think a lot of people suggest that there hasn't been investment. I simply don't believe that's true at all. I think there has been attention and tens of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure investments in that area. So, however, I do believe investment in that area is a good return on our investment. So I would support that. The reason I've had questions in the past, though, is I believe we do have mission creep, or should I say budget creep. And we see it a lot where a consultant has a certain amount and we do that, and then lo and behold, we have to throw some more money at that consultant with that same project. I would have a question for whoever can answer this. What was the original amount of money in this project for this consultant, Winter and Company? What was the amount that they collected for this project so far?
This is Dave Downing. I'm going to need to call on Andrew Spurgeon to answer that question. But before he does, let me try to explain a little complexity here. The actual contract was a much larger contract. I believe it was for Code Forward. Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong on that. And the Harris Park vision plan was a smaller scale task embedded within that much larger contract. So Andrew will probably give you some numbers that are gonna curl your hair because it's a much larger project. He can try to estimate the original estimated cost of the task, the Harris Park task, and that might give you some feel for comparison. Andrew, are you on the line?
Yes, Dave. Thank you. This task, as Dave said, was within a larger contract. The original amount was $62,655. The proposed contract amendment would add $34,230, making the total amount $96,885, which is fairly consistent with the cost of developing a neighborhood plan, or a little bit below the going rate for a neighborhood plan, frankly.
Councilor, it's Dave Downing again. Let me just add one more thing. We certainly understand and appreciate concerns about scope creep. That's always a concern, and it's your duty as council to make sure that staff doesn't get carried away with that. I guess I would venture to say that this was one time when the residents of the area asked us to do more. We felt that was the appropriate thing to do, and that's why we're approaching you now. Is that we didn't want to cut them off when they asked us, "Hey, look at this area over here. Let's look at another angle," that sort of thing. And so we apologize. We apologize for having to come back and ask for more money, but we thought it was important to make sure that no stone was unturned here.
Well, thank you for that answer. And I guess that was my concern all along, is that kind of adding more to a contract, and it happens often, obviously. But I think, in this conversation, we've had a really good discussion, and thanks, Mr. Downing. I think you and Mr. Lawrence and Ms. Troller and Mr. Spurgeon have, for me at least, highlighted a lot of good reasons that we need to move forward and amend this contract. So I guess I would say I was concerned about that, and as just fiscal responsibility, I did have concerns, but I think staff have come to us with some really good reasons and some good details and explanations that I needed to move forward. And I think an investment in this community and for the residents around Harris Park, I would support this. So I guess we're not taking any kind of vote, but just by a way of consensus, I would say move forward. I would hate to see this project and all of the time committed and all of the people who've been involved, you know, whether they were in the neighborhood or not. I think a lot of them were. I would hate to see $34,000 be the reason we can't move forward and finish up the plan and finalize it. I do share similar concerns with some of my colleagues about that particular area, and you know, the graphics, and do they have the computer capability and the know-how to get on there? A lot do, but there might be some who have raised issues with us that that's not their forte. However, I think that we should move forward, and I would like to suggest we move forward with this. So I know this is an information item and we're in study session, but I would gladly support amending this and investing in that community. Thank you very much.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to staff for the presentation. I am new to this discussion, but not to the project in its entirety. I attended, I should say, not necessarily involved. I attended the community meetings that were held and did hear and see from residents that they felt like they weren't entirely being heard during the entire planning process. Yes, investment and attention to our historic Westminster is necessary and important. But again, hearing from residents that they're not seeing it, they're not seeing movement, they're just seeing round and round of what we're doing and what we're planning. So I do agree in your presentation that residents expect action. But what I would have liked to seen in this presentation is not just a background, but more of a draft plan like we are seeing as an information item from the sustainability plan. I would have liked to seen and or have read what we have so far, what's come of what the consultant has produced thus far. I know that we got a brief overview and highlight as far as what the plan entails, but I would very much have liked to see more in depth, just comprehensively where they're at. And so with that, it's hard for me to move forward with another change order for adding more dollars to this project. One of my questions is, we've done a ton of plans such as this for other developments, for other projects. Where were we at in thinking that graphics were or were not necessary? I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around that this got missed. Is it something that was an oversight, or is it something that was needed to be added last minute? I guess I'm confused on that part. So if you could give me some clarity in that, that would be helpful.
Nathan, could you take a shot at that one about comparing the budget to the task remaining?
Yeah, I can speak to the graphics. It's a good question. We always anticipated this sort of bird's eye view. It was in the original scope. The issue, as I highlighted in my presentation, was that the actual study area expanded about a third. And so it got much larger. We added, as Stephanie said, sort of triangle pieces south of 72nd, then over there on Bradburn, and we actually stretched up Lowell. And so in order to kind of update those, it costs more money to do more images of, more little buildings. So that's really what that was a reflection of. But it was something that honestly we had a really good feedback from that focus group of stakeholders who really kind of opened our eyes to that and said, these are really important areas that are kind of going to be missed. That they sort of they aren't in the TOD area, they're not in Harris Park. They're sort of these gaps, and they're really important, and they're frankly eyesores. And so there's a lot of opportunity for enhancement there. So we had some great conversations on including those, and those actually generated as much excitement, honestly, as the sort of 73rd Avenue core as to what the sort of future of those could be. So that's the real ask, is really just to have that bird's eye updated to encapsulate the expanded study area.
Okay. And for the budget, did we go into it thinking that we had a budget or that we're trying to allocate for a budget? My question revolves around what you just explained, meaning did we have a budget, say 100,000? I know that's really low, but if we had a budget of 100,000, we had a scope of work, and then we added all of these other sections, whether or not it was needed or not. Are we then allocating, trying to find funding for those other areas that we are now touching, or is this not funded yet and not allocated for dollars?
This is Andrew. I want to be clear that the city's budget process has money for these projects. So we came to the council for a contract amendment. The original budget of 62,000 and change planned for a certain geographic area and a certain number of meetings with the community. But as presented with the focus group, there was a desire both for more community engagement events and an enlarged study area. So those had budget implications for all the tasks associated with it. More planned content, more preparation for meetings, more issues coming out of meetings to be addressed. So everything has sort of grown exponentially as a result of the suggested direction from the focus group. And as Mr. Downing mentioned, we did want to try to be responsive to those concerns when they came up.
Okay. And then I noticed that you mentioned that there was some some attraction to public arts in these spaces. Is that something that the city has an allocation for art, or is that included then in the projects when they come to fruition?
I think you've stumped us in community development. I'm not familiar enough with the city's public art program to be able to try to make comment on it. And I guess I'll invite any other staff persons who's listening to comment on that.
Hi, it's Nathan again. Again, I'm not an expert. I've just been in a lot of conversations, as Stephanie has as well, with PRNL, who manages our public art. And as you've known, they added a bunch of sculptures to do the sculpture garden on 73rd, and that was what I was referencing in the presentation. It's been very well received, and people just in that area love art. And so, and that's a strength and a very big part of the character of that area. So I know, speaking with PRL staff, that in their PRL plan, that's part of, I believe the public art portion is part of the Code Forward. It's part of their overall plan, that they've identified that as sort of a place that's going to get more public art as funding comes. We know that that's sort of tricky now. We do have some income when new development projects come in, and I wouldn't be able to speak to what other budget items that they might have, but I do know that that's one of the priority areas for new funding, and that the Harris Park plan, you know, sort of identified some areas, some sort of gateways that would make a lot of sense to kind of bring that public art out. So right now it's sort of in the center, and that's a real presence, I think, that could really strengthen. And so we've identified some sort of gateway locations that could sort of host art as the sort of pieces come in and as funding becomes available.
It's Dave Downing. I understand that Jason Gink, our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Libraries, is on the line, and he might be able to add a little clarity here.
Yes, thanks, Dave, and thank you, Councilor Smith, for the question. I appreciate that. The Arts and Culture Master Plan, our first ever as a city, was completed just recently, and it did speak to the need to expand the program of public art, but also our maintenance functions. And we did a fair amount of engagement of folks to bring to the table of what that is and what the future will hold. Now, granted, that initial Arts and Culture Master Plan was more of a foundational piece, and our next steps would be to further engage with other planning efforts like Harris Park, like the Parks, Recreation, Libraries Plan, like, and everything in Westminster forward, to better understand what those needs are. Staff has successfully built off that plan recently. I think Dave touched on revisiting and revising how we're procuring art for the garden in that area, but also in partnership with economic development and bringing the Denver Crush program, the Crush Walls, which is really a successful program to historic Westminster area. So yes, we have a long way to go. Certainly, I think one of your questions was about, I believe, funding. No, we haven't identified all of that, but certainly we want to work strategically with the partners in Harris Park to determine, you know, what that need is going into the future. But I do appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. Just listening to the presentation tonight, and I know that we're not taking an actionable item on this as of tonight, just getting feedback, but I'm still not 100% as far as adding more dollars towards this contract. I understand that graphics can be helpful, but I would encourage us to look at doing it internally and seeing what type of graphic artists that we have on staff. I'm sure that we have capable people in order to be able to help in that regard. But I think that it's hard for me to fully move forward without really getting a full comprehensive review of even a draft of what the contract or the consultants, excuse me, has done thus far. So I'm still a no on this, but I appreciate the efforts and the all of the information and planning and dedication that not only staff but our community has given to this plan. I really think that, like I mentioned when I first started, investment and attention to this area is warranted and needed. And we know it's happening, but the actionable items, I think, is what's lacking. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Council. Just to give staff a heads up, we've had several requests for a short bio break, which we'll do when this item is complete. From my standpoint, the issue of the $34,000 is not where my question lies. I looked at the presentation and we talked about the attendance at the first meeting at the Grange at 80+ people. Then we saw the people who were there, as I think it was Councilor DeMott that made the note, there were a lot of people that were there that were not from the area. As we went into the second and third meeting, we saw those numbers drop almost by 50% based on what was presented on the slide. Doesn't mean there wasn't still interest, but it's a significant drop in numbers. We also talked about in the presentation the number of public safety items that still need to be completed down there, which I have absolutely no problem with, to make sure that we're making sure that the infrastructure, the streets, the curbs, whatever we're doing is in a safe manner. The issue I have is trying to complete a plan when we have no prospective investors. Right now, I am not aware, unless Ms. Toller can tell me I'm wrong, that we have anybody from a private investment area that has said that they're interested in investing in the Harris Park area today. So no matter what we plan, without a buy-in from the investment community, and I'm talking about private dollars, then the plan is just that. It's a plan that has no buy-in from people who are going to have to put the dollars in. The city will continue to put things in because we need to keep infrastructure and stuff like that there. But as far as going into bringing in new development, new businesses, I've not seen anybody come forward and express an interest from a banking, developers, investment firms, or renovations of large facilities down there in a number of years. Now, whatever reason they have for not wanting to invest at this time could be strictly with COVID. It could be the economy. It could be a lot of things. But my concern is finishing a plan just to take and set it on the shelf doesn't buy us anything. The other parts that some of the council members have talked about is trying to continue to have meetings when we can't meet in person and not being able to guarantee that anybody who wants to be there and participate is there because they can't get to us virtually. In my position right now, I don't support moving this forward, but it has nothing to do with 35,000. I don't think that there is private investment interest in this place right now. Hopefully that will change in the very near future. The city will have to continue to do some investments down there as we need to for public safety and other reasons. But I'm not at a point where I think we need to continue to mess with this one today. Things might change, and then we can bring it back and look at it at that point. I'm going to take one more comment on this, and then I'm going to try to wrap us up. Ms. Seitz.
Thank you so much. And apparently it's really dark in my room. So I have to gently disagree with the mayor. Part of the reason I want to support this is because I think that this is the community's imprint as to what they want to see built in the community and provide that level of certainty to the development community. So, you know, Councilor DeMont and I served on the building codes task force. And there was a lot of members from the development community in there. And one of the things they consistently said is they just want certainty. What are they expected to do? I believe Mr. Lawrence kind of talked about the fact that we have older regulations there that could actually be kind of noxious or prohibitive to having the type of development that the community wants. So I think that this gives Harris Park the opportunity to compete, to be attractive to those investment dollars. So perhaps it is a chicken and an egg, but you know, when we have done our comprehensive plan, you don't do it for an immediate developer, you do it for a long-term vision of what do we want our community to be. And so as you kind of get the market heating up, there's already that certainty that has the community's pulse, the community's input as to what they want, and we're not just building what comes at us that may not be in the community's best interest. So I am still supportive of going forward. I know the mayor has many years of development experience, but I'm going to gently disagree with that assessment. Thank you.
All right, at this point, council, the staff is asking for some guidance on this. And Jody, hang on, I'll come back. I'll let you do a wrap up as soon as and let you do your comments. So go ahead, then I'm going to poll the council.
Well, thank you, Mayor. This has been a very, very helpful discussion. Appreciate all of the questions and concerns and comments by our city council. So thank you. Just one point of clarification. There are projects in review currently in this neighborhood. Those are our private development projects, and we can certainly provide more detail on those projects if that would be of help. And then staff will have a question in terms of council's direction tonight, and that is if this contract amendment is not to receive a majority support, we would seek clarity on whether council would be instructing us to abandon the planning work done to date and the input received and shelve that, or would council be instructing us to do the best we can to wrap the plan up with what we've got. and produce a closure to the engagement effort that we undertook in this neighborhood. That was my question, and thank you.
All right, let me see if I can phrase it. I think the question is multifaceted, so I'll try to answer it in parts. Question is, first is, should we move forward with this contract amendment? And after that, if we determine how that is, then we'll ask for the other parts. So let me start with that part of it. And I will ask, are there any members of council who are objecting to moving forward with this contract amendment other than myself? Mr. DeMott?
I have a follow-up question to Mr. Andrews' comments just now. You alluded to there being some development in there already. Is that something you could share with us, exactly what that is? Is that stuff that we already know about? I can think of the rodeo market, perhaps. I didn't know if there were other things that you were alluding to.
Thank you, Councillor DeMott. Excellent question. I would ask if either our Economic Development Director, John Hall, could speak to that, or perhaps one of his team, to the degree that we can comment on individual projects. John, are you able to provide any insight on that, on the list or collection of interested projects?
This is John Hall, Economic Development Director. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think to answer Councilor DeMott's question most directly, I think most of it you're already aware of. So there is work going on as related to the rodeo market. There is work going on related to senior housing at 73rd and Lowell. And there have been other interests, but I wouldn't say that necessarily there are major other developments within the boundaries of the Harris Park Vision area at this time.
And so I guess that kind of leads into my other question that I'm wondering before I can give you an answer, is if we stop where we're at now, where does that leave the plan? Or is it potential to pause now until we get through some of this COVID issue and figuring out, what the world's going to look like in 3 months? What does that look like? From the ones that you mentioned, I imagine we're not stopping any of that stuff, and we do already have some work product. So what would that look like to either call this first phase or press pause?
This is Dave Downing. I'd like to comment there. Given those two choices, to wrap up the plan and perhaps call it a phase one, or to push the pause button, I would recommend the pause button myself. I think we have worked so hard to be inclusive in this neighborhood and get so many people involved in providing input. I think to suddenly say we've concluded the study would send a message that we don't want to be sending, that we didn't take that last step to be certain that we had consensus. So I would highly recommend the pause button myself.
And can I, on that, Mr. Downing, if you did that, is the portion of work that's already done, is that something that could move forward? So like that things don't necessarily have to pause except for looking at if that's areas expanded or not, because you guys mentioned in your plan that part of the reason that they need this extra money is because of expansion on the original area and scope of what we were looking at. So with that in mind, does that still give you a place to start from to see, if that work product could be used?
Absolutely, Councillor. I remember Nathan during his presentation using the phrase "the low-hanging fruit." These are things that have been identified through the work so far on the plan that we can move forward with virtually immediately. And I think that's that would be a good way to proceed until we're able to do a final completion of the plan with full consensus from the neighborhood.
Great, thank you very much. I think in light of that answer and with the mayor's concerns, my preference would be pause and let's work with what we have and, you know, kind of see where things go. And so it's not saying, no, we're not gonna, I mean, obviously we're gonna continue to invest and see how we can benefit from this plan. I think it also speaks to the mayor's concern to see if, you know, there's extra attention or interest into the area, I guess is a better word. And then we're not putting those extra dollars out right now at this time, you know, with those things all taken into consideration. So I think my preference would be for us to kind of look at where we're at right now, press pause, and then maybe revisit this in a handful of months. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Downing's answer to Councilor DeMott gave me the information that I needed, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to try this once more, and I'll try to catch everybody. Mr. DeMott, I understand your position is a pause. Councilor Seitz. Pause, move forward. Councilor Seitz.
Can you not hear me?
We could not
I think
hear
I
you.
was double muted. I apologize. So I want to be really clear, but before I answer, maybe I'm missing something. My understanding is that the expansion of the scope, like the actual area, those other parcels or portions of the neighborhood, that was at the residents, the participants' request, correct? Like, so during community outreach, residents thought that we had created too small of an area and they wanted it expanded. Am I right, or was this at staff suggestion, or was it at the consultant suggestion?
I think you're correct in that I heard repeatedly it was recommended by the group, not by staff or the consultant.
So I guess I would like to honor that feedback. I would like to have a plan that is no less than the plans that we have commissioned in other portions of our city that have the same level of illustrations to communicate the thoughts of the community to the development community. So there's clarity and alignment on what's expected. I don't feel this is budgeted dollars. I don't feel like this is essential to put the pause button on. So I guess I still feel comfortable going forward at this point. I have consistently told people I will not be part of the kind of starts and fits in this area. I really do want to follow my word that we were going to do this plan. And so I'm committed to spending really a very minimal amount of money to follow through and follow this to completion based off of their input.
Ms. Scully, your feedback?
I support moving forward, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Seymour.
Having gone back and forth on this, I believe Mayor Pro Tem Seitz makes a good argument that we owe the same level of completion that we've given to the rest of the city, and those, especially those 30 committed people that stuck it out, should see the completed plan. So I'm willing to go forward.
All right, Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too have gone back and forth on this, but I think it's in everyone's best interest to hit pause. Not to say that the work, and let me ask a quick question as I'm formulating my thought. Mr. Downing, what would be the implication if we hit pause on this? Would we close out the consultant's contract as is? And would this cause us to have potentially another contract in the future, and or potentially, like, where would that leave us if we paused it contractually?
I believe the answer is yes to both of those questions you asked, Counselor. Yes, we would close out the consultant's contract, and yes, we would contract again to do any completion work at such time city was ready to do that.
Okay. So at this time, if we paused it, we would shelf what we've already conducted, close out the contract, and then in order to restart, potentially may not restarting, we could essentially go off of what we have. But if we wanted to restart this contract, we would then bid it for the work. And to be clear, we're only bidding then for the graphics then, correct?
So maybe I'm not prepared to answer those specific questions. You know, I'm probably trying to speak for the consultant when I can only imagine that the consultant would not want an indefinite continuation of the contract, not knowing how long into the future he might be asked to provide additional services. I don't think any consultant's going to want to stick to a fee schedule without knowing when, at what point in time those services might be requested. So I was speculating that the consultant would probably want us to close out the current contract and then provide a proposal to us at such time in the future when we wanted to proceed.
Okay, because I guess that would depend on how the contract is written. Because I've known to have contracts open for several years trying to figure out solutions. So I guess there's, just for brevity, there's just too much unknown for me. And now that I've asked my questions, I'm even more in a pickle, because what I don't want to have happen is us close out the contract and then find we need to bid again. But I also am not I'm not confident in making a vote to continue the contract as is. And so my original gut was to explain that I think we should pause and see how much we can get done with the current contract. So I guess I'm going back to my gut feeling is to, and the facts that were listed tonight is to pause it and to move forward with the items that we have. If we so choose and so need to look at potentially reopening this or getting another bid to do a full completion, I'd rather have that than move forward. So if my suggestion is to pause. So, thank you.
Mr. Vols.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. We've had a lot of great issues discussed, and I share a lot of the concerns raised by a number of my colleagues. I've shared those for a while. I think a lot of answers have been offered, and it makes me feel better about this additional amendment that we're considering tonight. I think we should complete the work, and I think we ought to stick to our commitment to the residents of that community. I sat in a lot of meetings with a lot of our neighbors in Harris Park who were there and committed time and energy, and so I want to see this through, and I don't want to stop it now. I think my preference would be that we move forward and we support the staff recommendation of the amendment. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Andrews, based upon the polling of the council, you have a majority of council that wants you to move forward with what you've proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will then prepare the council memo to bring this back for council's consideration as a contract amendment.
All right. It's currently right now, according to the clock, it's 8:49. We're going to take a short pause for a bio break. I know several people have been waiting for a while. We will return at 8:55. So council, take your breaks and try to be back on time. All right, Ms. Parker, I have 8:55. Can you confirm that all the council is back?
Certainly. Mayor Atchison,
Yes.
Councilor Demott,
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem Sights,
Hello.
Councilor Seymour,
Here, thank you.
Councilor Scully,
Here.
Councilor Smith,
Present.
and Councilor Bowles.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Andrews, and we're going to start the COVID update. I'm going to give you the group. Some of you heard this morning on the chamber call. I'll do this for everybody who wasn't there, plus the public. As everyone is aware, a statewide mask order was put in place last week by the governor. The Jeffco Health and Tri-County orders are still in effect, as the state order only applied to indoor settings. If there is a conflict between any of these orders, the most stringent order, especially on outdoor stuff, takes precedent. The same with the indoor. The indoor orders from the state and Tri-County and Jefferson County are very similar. I talked to Mr. Frankel about it. They're looking to see if there's any particular issues that we may have to deal with later. The Colorado public health officials are requiring many counties that receive variances but are now seeing higher cases counts to submit mitigation plans by today, or risk having the variances rescinded. The plans must demonstrate how to stabilize and reduce cases. Jefferson County is one of those who received the notice that they are seeing higher numbers go up, and they have to submit a mitigation plan or risk losing any of the variances that were previously approved by CDPHE. So 2 counties, Gilpin and Jefferson County, both received that direction over the weekend. The other piece that we saw over the weekend is that there are 2 urban areas, one being Colorado Springs, the other being the city of Denver, where we're seeing large spikes in infection numbers. Also, on a countywide basis, city and county of Denver, El Paso County, and Adams County were the top 3 counties with increasing numbers. As they stated earlier, masks will help, but people really need to stay away from each other, according to new Colorado state modeling. Part of the thing that has been hindering of this is testing delays are hindering American ability to control the virus. Experts said on the morning news shows yesterday, and results should be available within 48 hours, but in many states, the backlog is taking more than a week. Governor Polis was on a national broadcast and meeting the press over the weekend, and his comment was something to the effect that the national testing situation is a complete disgrace. Jefferson County schools are still discussing a hybrid style of return to school. The Colorado Education Association for Jefferson County is raising a number of issues and has started a Recall the Restart campaign, as it was announced today. Westminster Public Schools previously announced full return to in-person learning is what their plan was. I have not seen a final version of a plan for Adams 12, but they are still looking at variations. Denver Public Schools, which is the largest school district in the area, will start the school year August 24th virtually, possibly returning to in-classroom learning on September 8th, but that will be dependent upon their infection rate. Over the weekend, we saw the town of Lyons shut down its parks until further notice, citing the crowds and the COVID risks there. And it's a reminder of some of the things that are dealing with Congress. We are in the final week of the $600 unemployment stimulus. There's been some conversation about whether or not that was going to be in the next package or not, but we're hearing various stories between the Senate and the House and whether or not the president would be vetoing the bill if it gets to him. So stay tuned for those. From a regional level, we are still seeing numbers go up. We're seeing hospitalizations still go up, but not necessarily just with COVID cases. As I indicated on the call this morning, we're seeing a larger number of hospitalizations due to the fact that people were deferring health issues, such as diabetes, heart and lung issues, stroke issues. to the point that they've become critical and now are in the hospital. Approximately 2 of our immediate hospitals are in the 90% plus occupancy, but again, not large numbers of COVID, but other items that are taking up space in the hospitals. I don't have a current list of numbers because the last date I had any hospital updates was Wednesday of last week. Mr. Andrews, we'll turn the rest of it up to you and the staff, starting with item 2.
Thank you, Mayor. We will be providing 3 levels of updates tonight. The first one will be led by Max Kirschbaum, our Director of Public Works and Utilities. Max will be followed by Larry Dorr, our Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer. And closing out the update tonight and getting ready for any questions we may have will be John Hall, our Director of Economic Development. I would lead with just a couple of overarching comments. And one of those is that we did send out information last week to City Council that is publicly available, and that is the city's rapid test program is beginning at the MAC on Thursday this week. And that is a very rapid test on the spot result program. So participants who receive the test will get their test results right on the spot. I believe the time frame is within 20 minutes. We hope that program will be able to help offset some of the challenges that we're now seeing. So I just wanted to provide that overarching comment and then turn it over to Max Kirschbaum to provide more details on where we're at with our COVID response and some of the data that we're seeing.
Thank you, Jody. My comments this evening are in 2 parts. Before I begin with the first of those 2, I'd like to come back and offer a little information in regards to a question Councillor DeMott asked at the beginning of this evening related to data on compliance with mask wearing. Although I didn't have that information at hand, I've used some of the time from the beginning of the meeting to now to do some additional looking at Tri-County Health and Jefferson County Public Health. And when you look at Tri-County Health, there's actually extensive data. Most of it is direct observational data across the 3 counties that they represent. And in some cases, more specific at a municipality level, including Westminster. If you look at, you break down Adams County, the compliance rate observationally is not great. It's on the order of about 58 to 60% compliance noted. If you look at Westminster data over the course of the last several months, that compliance ranges anywhere from 63% to 86% as a high. And in the more recent weeks, those compliance statistics are generally in the middle 70s to the lower 80%. And again, that's based on, in Westminster's case, they have selected 10 different sites at which data is collected, and they have several hundred, if not 1,000 data points when they report this information. I cannot find, at a quick glance, I could not find similar data that Jefferson County Public Health may have, but we can take a look into that. With that, I think I'll move along to the first item for this evening. Matt, if you'll help me with the slide. Go ahead. These next 3 slides are similar. You've seen them for the last few weeks. I will show them again in a same format. Looking at the state data, which is current through Saturday, you can see that increasing trend continues in the 3-day average of cases. And you'll also see in each one of those weeks, you see a dip that's usually associated with a gap in reporting like over a weekend period. But in general, that trend line continues to move upward from that low point, as we've discussed, on the 15th of June or so, let's say mid-June. To go along with that, CDPHE also presents a chart which shows the positivity rate, and it too has been creeping steadily upward. It had reached a low of about low 2% of tests that return positive. That number is now up around 5%, and it appears to continue to show a steady climb. So this information is pretty consistent with the regional report that the mayor just offered just a few minutes ago. We move on to the next slide, and we look at next at Jefferson County data. Again, presented similar as before, and I focus on the 3-day moving average line, the dark green line. Again, you see some variation that is probably based on gaps in data reporting, but generally that trend is continuing to move in an upward direction. No change there. And then finally, the next slide. Again, Tri-County presents their information in a little bit different format, but here are you can see the vertical line that represents the last 14-day period. Again, a 3-day rolling average, and continues to be on the upward trend over time. And here again, just like in the other two cases, you do see dips along the way that represent just reporting gaps. Okay, with that, I'd like to move on to the second part of what I was going to present this evening. And go ahead and hit the next slide. If I just return back to April 20th, we spoke to you in a study session and talked about policy and conditions. Go ahead with the next slide. There we go. I think it was a build type slide. We thought it would be wise to revisit both policy and conditions for reopening city facilities. At this time, we would not recommend any change to the policy statement as we prepared for you and had your agreement on April the 20th. We go to the next slide and look at conditions. I'm going to show this to you in two parts. This, other than the red text, the way we presented it to you on the 20th of April, and the conditions that we had agreement on that we've been using as the guiding principles for reviewing plans and making partial reopening or even full reopening of some city facilities. So from then to now, if we go to the next slide, this is my final slide. Here are the changes that we are recommending. And again, I would your concurrence this evening that these would be the right changes to the conditions that we are using as we evaluate reopening plans. So we strike the first one because the stay-at-home provision is long ago lifted, and we're moving on to the phase beyond that, the safer at home and in the vast great outdoors, but not at the state level, not quite ready to move forward to protect our neighbors phase. So we're in that middle stage. We also recommend at that time that we would want to see number of confirmed cases statewide and by the 2 county public health agencies to be on the decline. Because there have been, we recommend deleting that as a condition and replacing it with that third bullet that's shown in red there that says new. Because there have been so many public health orders, amendments to public health orders, variances from the public health agencies, and even resolution from our city council. We think it makes more sense to just ensure that as a minimum, we're meeting all, in a collective manner, we're meeting all of those public health orders, amendments, county orders, or approved variances, and obviously city council resolutions. We think this provides a better guidance because there are literally hundreds of pages of documents that help shape where we would be heading with city reopening of facilities. And at this time, I would also just make the comment that while we did take a second look and make a change that allowed personal paddlecraft at Stanley Lake to begin this past Friday, we are otherwise remain on a pause on reopening additional city facilities at this point. Not that that couldn't change, but at the moment, that's where we stand as a pause. So I would conclude here, subject to your questions, but ask that, if possible, your concurrence or not with these conditions as presented on this slide for us as staff to use as the guiding principles. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Hang on just a minute, if you will, Max. I think I've got one question. It's from Mr. DeMott.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple of questions actually. So the first one being on the testing. So do we know on the testing, you showed the increases in cases. What's the actual testing rate? Has the number of actual tests increased as well substantially? If you had that in the slides, I didn't catch it. So I'm just curious about that portion.
No, it wasn't contained in the slides. You didn't miss it. But one of the first charts, if you look on the CDPHE website that we consult pretty much daily, also shows the number of tests performed either by CDPHE itself or by commercial labs. That too has been on an increasing slope over time. And in fact, it is typically at or around 8,000 per day. And I notice, I think it was Saturday data, I'm kind of going from memory, but I believe it was Saturday data that showed as high as 12,000. That's one spike in that data, but it has been on an increasing rate. We were seeing data in the range of 5,000 to 7,000 per day. Typically now, if you look at that chart, it's probably in the range of 6,000 to 8,000 per day, but on an increasing number.
Great. And I think it would be interesting if we could see that as part of the slides moving forward, if that's possible, because I know we get these reports pretty regularly and I appreciate them. I've been doing a little bit looking at the data myself and comparing it to like a resident count of 113,000. It looks like infection rates in the city are somewhere along the lines of 0.005 people infected if you go off of a rough residency of 113,000, and it looked like the death rate is much lower for residents, obviously, which is a good thing. No death is really something we want to have to accept, but things being what they are, the more data that we could get, the better. I know I've asked about this before because I think I'm specifically, and I know the mayor said we didn't have new numbers on beds, but I think those are important metrics for us to be able to measure things like actual hospitalizations, the death rate. It would even be interesting to know the death rate in the residents as far as like the age demographics or where they're, what area of life those folks are in. So the more data we could get, the better. I think that it's been very valuable to date, and you guys have done good providing it. But I'm always going to ask for more because I think it really helps us when you come to us and ask for different decisions and trying to gauge where we're at with this this pandemic or virus. The other thing that I'm curious about is on the point of facility specific plans. Specifically, what I'm really interested in, I'm going to continue to be interested in, is the opening of City Hall so that we could get back to in-person meetings. And I know that there's a lot of complexities around that, but I'm just curious, is there any specific movement around that portion of it?
Councilor Demott, specific to City Hall, if okay, I would like to ask Deputy City Manager Barbara Opie to speak directly to the City Hall plan.
Great.
Thank you, Max. This is Barbara Opie, Deputy City Manager. We have our plans put together. We are still working through some of the details. There's a lot of intricacies with we have 10 different departments represented in that building. And so that is a challenge for us. We do plan to return to City Council next week. There had been a question, I believe, a week ago, asking about when we might be able to do in-person council meetings and what those might look like. We do have some information and recommendations we want to review with City Council on what that might look like. But as Mr. Kirschbaum had mentioned, as the number of cases are increasing at this time, we are on a pause right now with adding any other facility reopening because we are trying to make sure we're caring for the health of our residents as well as our employees. And so that's where we are right now. But we do have the plans drafted up. We are moving forward with getting everything prepared. We do have quite a bit of new plexiglass in the area, including in the council chambers. That is in progress, if not already installed. And so that's a lot of what's underway at this time.
Great. I really appreciate that information. I will say that I continue to get more inquiries about being able to actually have in-person meetings, and it seems one silver lining of this, if there is any, is we have a lot of participation because people have been listening to the meetings at a pretty good rate, and so I think there's a lot of interest to be able to join us at meetings, which I appreciate. But I do appreciate also that we're putting the safety of our citizens and our employees and the council at the forefront. But I also think, back to my data point, I think that really helps us. The more information we have on that, the better equipped we are to deal with this. So I appreciate those answers and your time that you guys put on this every week, and it's always very insightful. Thank you very much.
At this point, are there other questions for council? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next report. Ms. Smith, go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along with questions that Councilor Demott had, what conditions are we currently meeting on the slide that was just presented? Because according to what I've read, thank you, what I've read is that we're meeting most, if not all, correct?
That's correct. We will ensure that all of these conditions are met when we come forward to the city manager's office for a specific plan to be approved. And so far, we have been able to sustain. There are supporting businesses, supplies are adequate. All of these things are certainly subject to change with time, but they've all met the criteria.
Okay. And I guess I may have missed it, but for the policy conditions, what are the conditions of as far as getting us back in full business, as far as keeping us in an emergency state? I guess I'm confused on what conditions we're trying to meet.
These are the conditions that we are trying to meet as presented on this slide. Maybe I could illustrate with an example. In the case of libraries, we have a detailed plan that would ultimately end in complete use of the facility pre-COVID. But at the moment, the portion of the plan that has been approved is the part that allows drop off of materials and curbside pickup of materials. We have not moved forward to that next step in the case of the library. So that's maybe a simple example of how the plans are often phased or in steps as confidence builds and the ability to handle or do more is demonstrated.
Okay. And are you needing from council to approve this new bullet point for a condition?
That is what I'm seeking this evening, is council agreement that those 2 deletions make sense and that 1 addition makes sense.
Okay, and so are we going through the whole entire report and then making a decision on this, or are you asking for it right now?
I guess that's up to the mayor. I would, before we break tonight, it would be helpful if I understood where you stand as a council.
Sure. Okay.
There are other questions on what Max and his team have presented? All right, there's no other questions, and let's try to deal with this one. Right now, the recommendation from, all right, Ms. Seitz, go ahead.
I apologize. I thought I had put my name in the queue. So I didn't have a question, but I just thought I understood that Mr. Kirschbaum was looking for some direction. And I am supportive of making the change. I think it allows a little bit more consistency, clarity, and manages expectations of our residents. So I would be supportive of staff's recommendation going forward.
Okay. One of the things that I want council to understand is we don't have the ability to overrule either the state or the health departments. We can add to it, but we cannot decrease from those orders. So keep that in mind. And I think what the staff is trying to tell you is the first bullet is outdated. We've already gone past stay at home. The case numbers are being driven by the health orders. And as the health orders change, not only from CDPHE, but also from Tri-County and Jefferson County, depending on what those order changes are, we will have to adjust to those. So my recommendation to council at this point, similar to what Councilor Seitz talked about, is to agree with the removal of the first 2, and through clarification that we have to meet the public health orders from the controlling organization is the new bullet that's been added in. Is there any other comments in regards to this? Otherwise, I'll just poll the council if we're going to support staff's recommendation or not. Ms. Seitz, I've already got yours. Mr. DeMott, yes or no?
I'm supportive.
All right. Ms. Scully?
I support.
Ms. Smith?
I support.
Mr. Seymour?
I support with reservations on the new order is that we are far exceeding the recommendations in that we have no one in our buildings other than the minimum situation, and being out and about in the business world, we're seeing activity, and I think that's important for our residents to see at our city hall also.
Mr. Vols?
Yeah, I support staff. Excuse me. I support staff recommendations and thank them for all their hard work. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Kirschbaum, you've got your answer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right. Mr. Andrews, let's move to the next item.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could call on Larry Dorr, our Deputy City Manager and Chief Financial Officer, to provide the next stage of our update tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. This is Larry Dorr. Once again, thank you for the introduction. Mayor and Council, this coming Sunday at your planning session and retreat, I'll have much information for you regarding the city's financial information related to COVID-19 and also related to the 2021 budget. So I'll hold that information for that time as we're continuing to build that out for your view. Tonight, I just want to provide you with a little bit of an update and a presentation on things happening related to the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. I'll do that in just a moment here, but let me just report also that the FEMA public assistance to date has not changed since my report a week ago. $427,100 spent and referred to FEMA for public assistance and reimbursement. And now I'll just go ahead and talk a little bit about what's happening in the area of CARES. On May 18th, Council set forth 4 guiding principles, and I've responded with funding details and information related to our 4 pillars, our 4 guiding principles, which are economic recovery, and you've heard much about that in things happening with Westy Rise and Dine, our Westy Small Business Grant, and rent assistance program. Last week, I had updates on social recovery and things happening in our neighborhoods and in our public areas that can help our community reconnect. Also, I've provided updates on the 3rd, which is the people and programs serving people, and our vision as a community for providing housing assistance and food security to those vulnerable in our community. And then tonight, last but not least, I have an update and providing a proposal for $2.5 million in spending related to CARES, and that's in the local government response, local government recovery dimension, and that's to provide a little bit of input there. And Mr. Williams, if you would just kindly put up the one PowerPoint slide that I have, I'd like to just run that through quickly with you, Mayor and Council, and then Mayor, if you would test with the members of Council for general agreement and consensus around the direction that we're going with this, that would be much appreciated, and staff will dive into this, keeping in mind that we have some very fast approaching deadlines to disperse CARES, but in this case, to first sustain government operations as a city government. You know, many of these, I will tell you, Mayor and Council, will look familiar to you. This telecommuting support really is what we're involved in here tonight. We have many needs related to hardware and software that our teams have estimated at this $876,000 number. We will do and have needs for things as we begin to open City Hall in the future that will further support our operations in a manner that allows us to have public health issues addressed and be properly socially distanced, and utilizing hardware and software to not just telecommute, but connect to the public and to our elected officials, boards and commissions, and others in telecommuting electronic fashion. Next is related to facility modifications, and you heard a little bit about that earlier from Deputy City Manager Opie. We're working rapidly to get modifications in place to include plexiglass and to provide for security and other things to help our facilities adapt and sort of modernize toward the needs presented by COVID-19, to include automated temperature taking devices and other things at our entrances as we transition to a place where we will be welcoming the public back into our facilities. Also, of course, we will need to have necessary equipment, cleaning, supplies, and personal protection equipment, PPE. And we are preparing to organize and increase our inventory related to PPE and cleaning supplies. You saw that as one of your criteria on the previous slide, as presented by Max Kirschbaum, that we need to have a sustainable supply of PPE, and this would be provided for under our CARES local government response. And then last but not least, I want to report that we've completed our hazard pay disbursements for our first responders and for those of our workers who have to get the job done out in the Westminster community, but in close contact either with the public or their worker colleagues, be it repairing signal lights, water mains, working in trenches out in the public, whatever the case may be, in close contact with one another, and therefore exposing themselves potentially to COVID-19. And we've completed that. You see that for those workers who are at risk, and I can tell you that that involved over 750 workers and nearly 290 first responders. We completed that just last week. And then finally, we are undertaking a response and assessment through our police department that will help us understand the city's response to COVID-19 and some considerations going forward. So with that, more information on, of course, the revenue streams, expenditure considerations coming this Sunday. Mayor and Council gave you the FEMA public assistance update and also this final dimension of CARES local government response. And I want to let you know that any additional updates in the future, now that I've sort of covered all four of the guiding principles, will come and transition to our reports under long-term recovery. And our Director of Economic Development, John Hall, will be following me here, and we will be folding all of these activities and their impacts into long-term recovery as we move forward, and I'll be focusing more on the city's revenues and financial sustainability in the short term and in the long term in our 2021 budget and beyond. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd welcome any questions, any comments, and just make sure that we're on track with an informal consensus, and we'll carry forward. Thank you, sir.
All right, Mr. Dorr, let me confirm that what you're proposing on this slide is what you believe the city can effectively spend of those dollars by the time that we have to have that to be in compliance with the grant of those CARES dollars?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we've had a process, Mayor and Council, we've had a process of submittals from our department heads across the city recommending disbursements related to CARES that can support these various initiatives. And we would not set forth any CARES activities that we believe we could not accomplish before the various deadlines imposed by not only the federal government, but Jefferson County and Adams County in the city's intergovernmental agreements. So, yes, we do believe that we will accomplish all of these throughout the course of 2020 in line with all of our deadlines.
Okay. At this point, I will poll and ask the council if there's anyone who has an objection to the proposed plan from staff for the expenditure of these dollars in support of the activities at the city. Ms. Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dorr, I was just wondering, it has a line item for our police department. What about our fire department, EMTs, that sort of thing? Is that rolled into that?
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I think that you're responding to the last bullet point on this slide that Mr. Williams has presented, and it's a response and risk assessment. It's organization-wide. It's being coordinated through our police department and headed up there in terms of what we're doing. I've just noted that from an emergency response perspective, but of course that I want to make clear that response, city's response and the risk assessment going forward is organization-wide, and yes, would include fire and other departments relevant to, including the city manager's office, relevant to our response and go forward with COVID-19. So yes, coordination through the police department, but organization-wide.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I'm seeing no objections unless I'm missing something, but Ms. Smith was the only one who came in. Mr. Dorr, I believe you have approval from the council.
Thank you, sir. And I'll just invite, thank you, Mayor and Council, and I'll just invite Mr. John Hall, the city's Director of Economic Development, to follow me here with item number 4, long-term recovery. Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's good to be here again this evening, and my comments are very brief tonight. Again, I want to start with some high-level information. I have mentioned before that we have started getting local area unemployment information on a monthly basis. And the unemployment figures for June have been released. Statewide unemployment increased slightly from 10% to 10.5%. And locally in Westminster, almost unchanged from 11.1 to 11%. So moving from May to June, we didn't see quite the positive direction that we had hoped to see. What we saw really was kind of the stabilization of those unemployment rates at the 10 to 11% level. Digging down into the numbers a little more deeply, there were some sectors that did improve. The leading sectors for job growth included leisure and hospitality, retail trade, professional and business services, and manufacturing. Financial services was noteworthy in the number of jobs that were lost during the month of June. So we're keeping an eye on those aggregates as we move forward. I did want to touch for a minute on some of our programs, on 3 of our programs that you should be familiar with by now, at least by name. The Westie Rise and Dine Restaurant Assistance Program is still currently taking applications. We've approved 45 applications totaling $365,000. The average grant amount is $8,100 per business. The total revenue, annual revenue represented by those 45 businesses is $35 million. And combined, they represent 401 full-time equivalent positions. So we're pleased with how that program is going. I'm also pleased to announce that the Small Business Stabilization Program, which is being administered by Adams County with funds from Westminster, is continuing to approve applications. 5 Westminster businesses have been approved over the past couple of weeks, and 4 of those were minority and or women-owned businesses. And so we are pleased to be reaching different parts of our community than we have heretofore had a great deal of interaction with. Finally, I just want to update you on the Westie Rise Above Rental and Mortgage Assistance Grant Program to help citizens with rent and mortgage payments. When we brought that program to you, we brought it to you as a program we would be administering in partnership or through Maker Housing, formerly the Adams County Housing Authority. Since that time, we have had interest in participation from the Jefferson County Housing Authority, now known as Foothills Regional Housing. And so we will be entering into an intergovernmental agreement with them as well. We're not asking for more money at this time. We are proposing to use the same terms with Foothill Regional Housing in administration of the funds as we are using with Maker Housing Partners. So those are some highlights I just wanted to bring to your attention this evening. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know the rest of the team is happy to answer questions as well.
Any follow-up from council? All right, thanks, staff. I'm seeing nothing at this time. For those who are listening in or being participating in this, I would remind us all that we are very precarious with the increases of infections both in Adams and Jefferson County. Both of our counties have been put on notice that if we can't find mitigation factors that are acceptable and bring these numbers down, that CDPHE will consider rescinding some of the variances that have been approved. This could have detrimental effects on our businesses, our community overall, and our financial standing. We need to do everything we can to try to help get these numbers back down so that we can potentially move forward. But right now, CDPHE is not entertaining any variances from anybody in the state until these numbers start to go back down. And we certainly don't want to lose the ones we've already been able to get for our businesses. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes all the business of the city for tonight. We wish you all well. Please be safe and take care of each other. We are adjourned.